My name is Hannah and I'm a senior at Arizona State University. Today, I will be teaching you about the PSA. By the end of this presentation, you will know what the PSA is, how to use it, and the benefits of using this method. Let's get started. So what is the PSA? PSA stands for Problem Solving Approach. This approach is an organized plan for solving any problems that you may come across in the realm of communications. These problems may be as small as sending an email or as large as giving a presentation. Let's take a look at the 5 major steps in the PSA. The first major step is to organize. The organization step is where you lay out your thoughts in a logical manner. Identify your problem and your audience. Look at all aspects of the problem and begin to identify everything that will need to be addressed. The second major step is the research period. During research, you seek to answer questions such as, when is this due? How do I best reach my audience? And what is the best objective solution to the problem? While doing research, be sure to use reliable sources and cite those sources if necessary. After research comes drafting. Drafting is where you put your thoughts and research into writing. Your writing should have an appropriate style for the audience, use proper grammar and punctuation, and the formatting should follow any established guidelines. After drafting, you review. This is where you check your work to see if everything makes sense and is the best possible version of what you have to communicate. During review, send a copy to a trusted peer or advisor and get an outside opinion. Finally, when review is complete, you can move on to the distribution step. Distribution is where you put your final work in front of the audience. This can mean passing out a report, sending an email, or even posting an advertisement on a billboard. Just make sure the delivery is appropriate and you are complete. While using the PSA, you do not have to follow the order. Look at the diagrams shown. The top diagram shows a linear fashion with no interchangeability. This is not how you're supposed to use the PSA. Rather, the PSA is supposed to look like the diagram on the bottom. You may start by researching and go back to organizing. Or you may draft, edit, and go back to redrafting. This interchangeability or flexibility is normal and should be used with the PSA. Just keep in mind that once you distribute, it's really hard to go back, so make sure it's perfected before distribution. Now that we have gone over what the PSA is, here's an example of when I used the method in my schoolwork. In this example, my classmates and myself were given the task of producing written instructions for something we knew how to do. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the cover of my final product, a far cry from the beginning stages of the product you will see on the next slide. Here are side-by-side comparisons of my work. On the left is what I started with, and on the right is the final product. I was able to improve the final copy by identifying my audience and meeting the standards of the audience. When using the PSA for academic work, it is important to realize that there are 2 audiences. The theoretical audience, which is the people that you are supposed to be writing to, and your professor, who will be grading your work. So why was the PSA method so effective for me? There are several reasons. First, it gave me structure. Not only did it give me a place to start, but as I continued to write, I knew exactly what to do next. The PSA was also successful because it forced me to ask questions about my audience and my format, all things that made the instructions useful for the people it was intended for. Lastly, the PSA was so successful because it encouraged peer review. Asking others for help was a huge asset because sometimes what makes sense to us doesn't to others. Having an extra set of eyes helped me fix things that I would have otherwise missed. What did I learn by using the PSA? There were 2 big things that I learned. First, the PSA showed me that my writing is far from perfect. What I thought was good to begin with turned out to be totally wrong, and the PSA helped me see that. On the other hand, the PSA taught me that with enough time and attention, I can be a good writer. My end result was far better than what I started with. and I ended up getting full points from my professor. So while I learned I am not a perfect writer yet, I also learned that I can be a great writer in the future. Not only does the PSA teach about writing, but it teaches about communication. First, the PSA teaches us that in communication, you have to be clear. Your purpose needs to be well stated and understandable. Otherwise, communication can get caught up in clarifications and misunderstandings. The PSA teaches us to be clear from the start in order to be more effective. The PSA also teaches us to be more effective communicators by knowing the audience. Knowing the audience helps produce better responses and lends to better outcomes. So what did we go over today? We learned that the nonlinear steps to the problem-solving approach include organization, research, drafting, review, and distribution. Next, we saw an example of how the PSA was used successfully in an academic situation. Finally, we saw that there are numerous benefits to the PSA, and that everyone can learn something by using this method. With practice, the PSA takes little effort and almost guarantees great results. If you are new to the PSA, it is understandable if you have any questions. Should you have any questions, there are several resources available to you. First, the book Technical Communications in the 21st Century by Doran, Keller, and Weiser is available at the ASU Hayden Library on the Tempe campus. If you would like to ask for help in person, there's always the ASU Writing Center on all 4 campuses, or you can always ask your professor. If you would like to email questions to me, feel free to do so on the email address listed on the screen. Thanks so much for your time, and happy communicating!